Everyone joined.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our event today that's on careers in research. I'm really happy that we had so many people joining us. I think we have 95 people signed up to learn more about the opportunities that are in research for international development. And I understand why we have 4 great people joining us today to talk about their experiences, including a special guest speaker, Rose Ndulu, who's starting a PhD this year after having worked for quite a few years, and she's already quite specialized in nutrition. So I'm very much looking forward to hear from her, and also from the 2 research fellows we have from the Action Against Stunting Hub, which is Gregory Cooper, and Hilary Davis Kershaw. And they will also talk about their work and how they ended up in academia. And then lastly, we have Lorna, who joined LIDC about a month ago as a research fellow. So I'm sure everyone is as excited as me to hear from them. Then just a few practical things. First of all, this is a very informal webinar. So it's here for you and for you to ask questions and find out more about the opportunities that are in academia. I will ask you to please keep your microphones muted until the end when we have a Q&A. You can also ask your questions throughout the event in the chat, so my colleague Alessia will keep an eye on it. And I've also received quite a few questions from you in the sign-up form, so we'll get to those towards the end of the event. And then, just a few other things before we get started. LIDC is a membership organization, so if you want to become a member, you can check it out on our website. My colleague Alessia will send a link to that one in the chat. Also, if you, at the end of this event, realize that maybe research is not for you, then one of our former interns recently sent me a job ad in her organization for an internship in Bangkok that maybe some of you would be interested in. It's in communications and policy, so might be a different opportunity that could interest you. So yeah, without further ado, I think we should get started. So first person to speak is Rose Ndulu, who is currently a senior nutrition program advisor with the NGO World Vision UK. She has worked in this field for, I believe, 18 years, but she's now decided to start a PhD at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So I'll hand over to you, Rose, so you can give us some background on your career path today and why you chose to do a PhD.
Yeah, thank you, Gun, and thank you for having me today as to join this students' event. It's a joy to be meeting everyone on Zoom. So just a brief background of myself. So I think my journey is probably different from the other colleagues on the call because I'm already in international development. As you introduced, I work for an NGO, international charity, World Vision, and I've been working with them for 11 and a half years. So I started off, and I am in international development. I hope to continue international development, but I've made a decision to do a Doctor of Public Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine starting next month. And I'm going to do that as a part-time student. So I'll start off full-time for the first time and then switch to part-time for the rest of it. So that's going to be an interesting journey. I'll continue working in my current role within that. So how did I get here? I did a Bachelor's of Science in Food, Nutrition and Dietetics back in Kenya in early 2000. And immediately after that, I worked in research, in food technology research very briefly as an intern. And we did work on biofortification, very groundbreaking work. And I didn't realize at the time that that was groundbreaking work. Really, I was straight from university and trying to find my footing in the workplace. So that technology, biofortification, has developed, and in my current work, we promote biofortified crops, rice, beans, etc. So I'm quite pleased that I was involved with that very early on. But I didn't stay very long in that. I sort of moved to humanitarian work, and I worked with Care International in a refugee camp in Kenya, the Dadaab refugee camp. At the time, it was the largest refugee camp, hosting over 500,000 refugees, mostly from Somalia, but others from Ethiopia and Eritrea and Uganda. So I started off not in nutrition or food or dietetics, but actually in education sector. So Care ran Care International, which is an NGO as well. They ran a volunteer program, which was paid. It was 1-year program for graduates, and the hope was that then you'll be able to find work with them after that, and most people did. So I started as a teacher, although my interest really was still within nutrition. And so I had a conversation with my manager at the time, and he was very supportive. So from the beginning, my aspirations were very clear, and we agreed that I would find opportunities to explore the world of nutrition. And in the camp, there were a lot of other organizations. So Care was one of those, but we had World Food Program, we had GIZ, etc., etc. So 2 organizations that were doing nutrition work. I was lucky to be allowed time by my supervisor to actually volunteer time with them, so to expose me to the nutrition sector. And I did that alongside my teaching role, which was good. But thankfully, within a year, Care started its own nutrition project. So they started an infant and young child feeding project, and I transitioned to that. So it was a natural transition in the same organization, although I started in something slightly different. But I think the exposure, having a supervisor who understood and was supportive of my career aspirations, was very helpful for me. And when this new project was starting, he already knew that I could transition to that. And I had received training in nutrition. I was offered trainings with other organizations while I taught. So I think having that understanding and shared vision with a supervisor really worked for me. So I worked in the refugee camp for some time, and then I moved on to work in a different program, still in the humanitarian space, with Save the Children. And this was with internally displaced populations after 2007 national elections. We had post-election violence in Kenya. So I'm originally from Kenya, so that's home. And that was a difficult thing to do, working with internally displaced persons, although I had worked with refugees as well. And I did that and then moved on within the same organization to do more humanitarian work in the northern parts of Kenya, northeastern parts of Kenya, actually at the border with Somalia, remote rural communities, but also were pastoralists. There was conflict, an insecure setting. And I did work in nutrition, management of acute malnutrition, but also food security, cash programming, etc. And at that time, I had sort of, I was providing frontline technical support for nutrition, but at the same time managing the technical team for nutrition and food security. So it started to expose me to some level of managing technical teams. And I did that for about 3 years. And I wanted to combine the humanitarian work with some development work, and that's how I moved to World Vision, so my current organization. I moved to Nairobi as a national nutrition coordinator for the organization, and that gave me the opportunity to work at a national level, but also and support a large portfolio of programs around the country, but also work across humanitarian and development work. which for me was useful because although I worked in humanitarian work, I quite quickly observed that the needs were the same in the sense of malnutrition. So both, whether it was humanitarian conflict or development setting, chronic and acute malnutrition was present in those different contexts, although the drivers of malnutrition will be different. So I wanted to get that experience of the two worlds of development and humanitarian, which are actually not as exclusive as such. A lot of these communities face similar issues, whether they are in an emergency, in a humanitarian context or not. So for the last 10 years, I've done work in multi-sector nutrition programs and in diverse settings. I work in my current role, I support programs in Africa and in Asia, so in Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, countries in Africa, mostly East and South and Central. So that's really my quick journey on how my career journey. So much of it, it's mostly development, not academia, but within that, I've done a lot of work on nutrition surveys and project evaluations and operational research as being part of that work. And that sort of made me think of how I can bring in more research into my work. And so in trying to answer what motivated me to do a PhD, I wanted something that a research degree, a research program that would give me a strong research grounding. So to build on to my programmatic, my practitioner skills and my leadership management skills, managing teams. And just to mention that because of I worked as a nutrition specialist, but I also enjoyed managing teams. I actually did a master's in organizational development, which really, I would say, helped my strategic leadership skills a big deal. And I've continued to enjoy managing technical teams. So I wanted something in research that would help me bring research skills and research as core part of the work that I do. And just to say as well, I've done work in policy influence for nutrition, both when I worked in Nairobi, but also in my current role. And that's something I have a passion for, to engage, to bring learning from program work into policy influence. So that's something I do and will continue to be doing. And my hope is that with the research degree, I'm able to really bring more research really into what I do, whether it's programmatic, policy influence, or even and the management side of it. It's the DRPH at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine is really designed for people that like myself, who are practitioners but want to grow into senior management, etc., and have research as part of their work. So that's really why I settled for a DRPH as well as compared to a PhD, which would lead me more into the academic side. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there, and happy to answer questions during the Q&A. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rose, for sharing your path to where you got to today, and also explaining why you decided to do a PhD part-time. I particularly like what you said about having a supervisor that's supportive of your ambition. I think that is something that's very key, not just in development, but probably in every profession there is. That's something that's a huge benefit. I'm sure you have lots of questions for Rose, so you can pop them in the chat, or you can wait until the Q&A. After all of our speakers have had a chance to speak. Next is Greg Cooper. He's a postdoc research fellow at University of Sheffield, and he works for the Action Against Stunting Hub. So I will hand over to you now, Greg, your presentation.
Cool. Well, hello everybody, and it's great to be here with you all today. Thank you very much to the organisers as well, for inviting me to talk today. And yeah, as Gunn said, my name is Greg Cooper. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Sheffield, and also on the Action Against Stunting Hub as well. And really just for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'll be just sharing kind of my pathway to date, give you a very quick kind of snapshot of what my average week looks like in terms of my different activities and responsibilities. And also at the end, just some kind of reminders I like to tell myself about, you know, kind of almost like points of encouragement and things to keep in mind, which may be useful to you if you're looking to pursue a PhD or a postdoc. So yeah, so let's jump straight in. So my pathway, I mean, really, I started, you know, back in kind of high school or secondary school, really becoming fascinated and passionate about physical geography, about the kind of forces which shape the world around us. And you can tell from this photo here in Iceland in 2011, I was kind of the geography head in the class. And from then on, I went on to do a BSc undergraduate degree at the University of Southampton. I really became interested in, you know, the ideas and the concepts of climate change and environmental sustainability, and the way that, you know, populations and communities across the globe adapt to these threats. And from then on, I went to do a PhD at the University of Southampton, but it was never really something I planned to do or really knew something a lot of. I didn't really know a lot about, you know, PhDs before actually applying. And what happened was I had a chance meeting with a professor who I'd done particularly well in their module in the third year of my undergraduate. And he recommended that I could potentially, you know, apply for this PhD. They were looking for someone, you know, who is interested in sustainability and the concepts of, you know, resilience and complex socio-ecological systems. And, you know, it was completely new to me. And I went away and looked at it and applied and was fortunate to be successful. And I then absolutely loved my 3 years as a PhD student working on a project known as Decma Deltas, which was looking at the kind of resilience and the sustainability of river deltas in South Asia. So both in India and in Bangladesh. And I was super lucky to be able to travel and do field work in Orissa in India. And yeah, it kind of, you know, spurned my love for getting into research, you know, collecting data, trying to answer research questions, but also for traveling and you know, being involved in communities in South Asia. And after doing my PhD, I was then really fortunate to go on to a postdoctorate position at the School of Oriental and African Studies. And the project was known as the Market Intervention for Nutritional Improvement Project. And essentially we were trying to understand the ways in which markets and the ways in which farmers transport their produce to market, how these could be adapted to increase the availability of fruits and vegetables in some of the more kind of nutritionally vulnerable, poorer market communities in North India. And here I knew very little about agricultural economics, or my background wasn't in agriculture. But during my PhD, I'd learned a technique known as systems dynamics modeling, which is a particular kind of computational simulation method. You know, you can run different scenarios and look at different kind of, you know, you can play with a system and look at different futures and different outcomes. And, you know, this was the kind of the transferable skill they were looking for in the postdoc position. So yeah, since then I've been working in food systems, kind of food and nutrition security and those fields. And I'm now currently a postdoc on the Action Against Stunting Hub. And my role is similar in a sense to as it was on the mini project, you know, involved in the design of household surveys, food environment surveys, thinking about how we can collect different qualitative and quantitative data sets, and then taking a lead role in the development of a systems model to, you know, try and understand how we can alter these market environments or household environments to try and increase access and availability of kind of healthy, nutritious foods, which may be able to tackle, or contribute to tackling towards childhood stunting in India, in Indonesia, and in Senegal. So yeah, I mean, the project is much larger. I'm kind of a much smaller part of the project, and it's great, you know, there's so many more people across different countries, different cultures. And really this work will be carry on going at least for the next couple of years. So what does the average week look like for me as a researcher? And you know, this may not be indicative of you know, the wider research community, but at least for me. So, and there are a couple of precise percentages here, but really they kind of, you know, I probably spend maybe half an hour to an hour a day doing administrative duties, you know, emails and arranging meetings and following up meetings and that sort of stuff. And that's probably common in most lines of work. I then try to set aside perhaps an hour or two each week to find and read new papers, to try and keep on top of, you know, the latest, whether it's the latest scientific evidence, it could be, you know, latest methodologies, or what have you. And then at least at the University of Sheffield, I'm involved in some teaching and supervising and mentoring of master's students. And, you know, that on the average week, that may be, you know, a morning each week of reading or having meetings with the students. And then in turn, kind of there's then the time for the rest of the research. So that could be developing, you know, the tools and the methodologies which we're going to be taking into the field to collect data on the stunting hub. Sorry, I've just got 31 here, which is very precise. Perhaps it could be 30%. But there's then time to you know, analyze the data which has been collected. That could be part of this project, or it could be part of previous projects, such as the mini project, as we're, you know, still trying to publish papers. And then also try to keep some time set apart to do more kind of exploratory stuff, perhaps on a Friday afternoon. You know, if I found some new data or a new methodology, then I just try to sneak in perhaps an hour of more exploratory work. But of course, that's kind of how I would like it to be. Of course, this kind of breakdown changes week on week. If there are deadlines coming, or if there are, or if, you know, students have recently handed in a piece of work, then, you know, the segments or the proportions may change. And of course, this is different for different people. But just to give you a very much a general overview. And lastly, for the last couple of minutes, just a few kind of key lessons or reflections, you know, on I guess my journey so far, and you know, things I like to remind myself of how I got here. The first is that sometimes a PhD or a postdoc can feel quite isolating, but you know, 95% of the time you will have a support network. That could be your supervisors or your colleagues or your mentors, and really just to encourage you to utilize and, you know, to bounce ideas off them as much as you possibly can. Sometimes it can feel a bit like you're, you know, bugging your supervisors a little bit, but you know, they, at least in my experience anyway, and I acknowledge that I'm, you know, reasonably fortunate, they always have time and, you know, are willing to contribute towards your, you know, your PhD or your postdoc. Also, for as long as possible, whether it's, you know, during your master's thesis or your PhD or your postdoc, you know, try to, for as long as possible, study subjects which you are, you know, interested and passionate about. It's a bit cliche, but it helps you get out of bed in the morning, and, you know, motivates you to answer those difficult questions. So for as long as you possibly can, keep researching things which you are interested in. Also, something that I've learned is that you don't have to be an expert in necessarily the concepts or the theories which you are studying, or at least not to begin with, because, you know, sometimes you'll feel a bit like an imposter. You know, I don't have a background in economics or even in agriculture, but I had a transferable skill. I knew how to do a particular modeling technique, which my previous postdoc was looking to utilize, and that helped me get the position. And over time, I was then able to come up to speed in terms of learning more about agricultural economics and international development. So if you have a transferable skill, it could be a particular computer program or language or particular methodology, these can often be highly sought after. And lastly, also just to say that it's important to keep, when you're doing your PhD, your postdoc, to keep a work-life balance as much as possible. Feeling fresh, feeling like you've had time off can be super useful to kind of rejuvenate and re-energize yourself in order to then actually produce work to the best of your ability. And if you have a good supervisory team and support network around you, then they will make this easy, and they'll make sure that you have a good work-life balance. But yeah, thank you for listening. A little bit of a personal look at my journey, and yeah, looking forward to the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Gregory. Really happy to have seen pictures from Iceland to Bangladesh. It's really great. I particularly liked your pie chart. I'm a bit scared to make one for myself, but maybe that's what we should all do to realize where our time actually goes. Our next speaker is Hilary Davis Kershaw, and she's an assistant professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and she's part of the Action Against Stunting Hub. She is both an epidemiologist and a registered dietitian, which I think makes her very well suited to work in the Action Against Stunting Hub. So Hilary, the floor is yours.
Right, thanks, Gun, and thanks, Greg and Rose, for those brilliant presentations. It's really interesting to see how others got to this point. So I'm just going to share some slides. And Gun, can you just tell me if that's gone to slideshow?
No, yeah, now it looks, but we
Right.
see it says no notes on the side, so we do have the little thing in there.
Oh, okay, wait, let me just try and make it. If you don't mind, I'll just leave it like that. I don't know how to get rid of the no notes. Oh wait, just hang on.
That's fine.
Okay. Right, hi everyone. I'm Hilary Davies Kershaw, and as Gunnar said, I'm at LSHTM, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where we will be welcoming Rose soon to do a PhD, and also on as postdoctorate on the Action Against Stunting Hub, working closely with Greg, and I'm in the nutrition work stream. So yeah, it's quite difficult talking about yourself, but it's actually quite nice as well to see how far you've come, and remembering those days as an early graduate, thinking, where am I going? What am I doing? And looking to see that actually things have worked out. So I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa, and had no idea what I wanted to study. I was interested in science and maths, and I actually started with engineering, and after a few years realized that's not where I wanted to be at all, and really wanted to work with people. And so I went to career counselor and identified that I wanted to study dietetics. And in South Africa, you can do it two ways. You can do the undergrad degree, or you can do first a BSc with certain subjects, and then do an intensive 2-year postgraduate in dietetics. So I did a BSc in biochemistry and psychology, and then went on to do the dietetics, in which I really, really loved those 2 years, but where I found that my interests lay when we did the community work. That was where I really felt alive and felt that we were helping a lot. And also doing the dissertation was probably my favorite part of those 2 years. So then I actually, after graduating, with my supervisor from my dissertation, got a job in his laboratory to continue with some of my dissertation work, and also worked. He had a clinic in a heart clinic in Kershaw Hospital, and so I worked part-time as a dietitian and part-time as a lab assistant, and really enjoyed the combination and the variety of doing both pieces of work. But as with most research jobs, the funding came to an end, and I had to make a difficult decision. And I had dual nationality, and some of my friends had come to the UK. So I left Cape Town and I came to the UK to work as a clinical dietitian in the NHS, and worked in various different hospitals and also in the community itself. But I always felt that I wanted to still do more research, and it was quite difficult to do research in the NHS when you were a clinician. But unfortunately, I applied and actually got a job at St Mary's University as a lecturer teaching dietetics. And so, so that was really great and gave me a chance to be in education, but also gave me a chance to be in research as well. And I think things would have stayed the same, but things happen, life happens. And in 2009, my father wasn't very well. And so I decided to go back to Cape Town, and I got a sabbatical and actually managed to get a job as a research manager on a randomized control trial in a peri-urban settlement, Kailicha, which was quite close to Cape Town. And this was a randomized control trial. So we had intervention neighborhoods and control neighborhoods. And we were looking to see if trained community health workers could help with the birth journey of mothers in these communities. And it was, yeah, it was a tough and challenging experience, but alongside it, I was able to do my master's. So that's another thing to consider when you're looking at jobs, is if you are in a research project, there's often space for you to do your master's. So you're using some of the data from the research project, but it needs to be slightly independent of the research project. So I did that through the University of Stellenbosch. And one of the really interesting things with this project, so in 2009, so you can see the old mobile phone that we used, but that it was one of the first projects to look at mobile e-health for collecting data. So our data collectors went out to the participants and actually collected all the questionnaires, etc., onto the telephone. And then this got uploaded, and as the data manager could then see what was happening. And so we had pictures, for example, this is a pregnant woman that's at minus 8 months. So it's 8 months till she's giving birth. And for example, you can see the woman has had the baby and the baby's 2 days old. And this data actually started my interest in epidemiology. And I realized that that is where I wanted to learn that skill as well. And so I was really toying with the idea, because I just finished my master's, and I was toying with the idea, do I do another master's or do I do my PhD? So it was a difficult decision, but the decision was almost made for me in that I started applying for scholarships for a PhD, and was successful in that at UCL. So I did my PhD and looking at big data, so looking at large big data sets, and looking actually at maternal health, but through more of a focus on mothers who were taking drugs during pregnancy and after pregnancy. And so the main things I learned were the epidemiological skills, but also doing qualitative research as well that I had not been exposed to. So it was a really, really good session. And as Greg said, he loved his PhD. I think I loved my first and my third year. I don't think I loved my second year, but yeah, but it is something to consider, because right at the beginning of my career, I would have never ever thought I would do my PhD. And so I was surprised myself that I was actually even entertaining the thought, and then actually finished it. So it was a huge undertaking, but it was really rewarding. And one thing I would say with anything, any degree or anything that you're doing, no one can take that away from you. And so it is a huge achievement to finish that. And after that, I actually stayed on as a postdoc in UCL, doing more epidemiology work. I then got a lectureship at University of Surrey in the maternal and child health department. But again, I just got itchy feet. I think you can see from my trajectory that I might get itchy feet quite often, but I just felt like something was missing. And a friend actually sent me the advert for this position in the ASH study. And I remember looking at it and thinking, oh, hang on, like nearly everything that I've done in my life fits into this position. So my biochemistry was coming to play, my psychology, my epidemiology, my dietetics. I was like, whoa, this job's made for me. But it was a difficult decision because it was moving from a permanent role to a fixed contract role. The commute was going to be quite a lot longer. There was going to be a lot more traveling. So it was a huge decision and did take a long time to decide. But I eventually thought, come on, let's just go for it. You know, if you don't take risks, you don't know what's going to happen. And so, yeah, I started as a research fellow at London School, and yeah, I was just so pleased to be there and to be in the ASH study. And so 2 years on, so I'm in the ASH study, so working with Alicia and Greg, as I said. And this comprises of 18 institutions, and it's UKR RI funded. And it's one of the main roles is to help set up the smothered child cohorts in 3 countries. So we've got Indonesia, so it's East Lombok in Indonesia, which is a small, quite undeveloped part in one of the islands in Indonesia. Senegal, in the area of Kaffrine, which is quite a desert-like area. And in India, that's our urban area, is in Hyderabad. And those are the partners that we're working closely with. And within this, it's a very interdisciplinary research project in that we've got these different work streams. So we're trying to work together to actually understand childhood stunting more. So I fall within the nutrition work stream, and our main things that we are responsible for are to look at the dietary intake to see what the infants and the mothers are taking in. We're looking at anthropometry measures, which is, for example, weight and height. We're taking blood samples and analyzing the bloods to see the nutrition. So, for example, the iron level in the blood. We're also looking at hair to look at the cortisol to understand chronic stress in the mothers. We're also looking at maternal depression, stress, and social support before and after the pregnancy. We're also analyzing the breast milk and looking at infant feeding practices. And we're looking at child morbidity or disease along these 2 years that we are studying the cohort. So these are some pictures from training. So I was lucky enough before COVID to actually go to Indonesia and India. I still have not been to Senegal, unfortunately. But a big part of my job is to help with the training of and capacity building of the research team in these countries. So these were our enumerators, and we had a great 2.5 weeks together. We learned all sorts. One of the things here, this was actually health and safety, because the enumerators are actually, when I say enumerators, I mean data collectors. They having to go to the participants' homes on motorbikes, on their scooters, and they prefer this because some of the roads are too small and narrow for them to actually go via car. So this is the way that they transport. But some of the time they have to carry quite heavy equipment. And so we were workshopping with them how to do it best, and how to also just keep themselves safe as well as the equipment, so that both would last the length of the project. This was also anthropometry training. So we're looking at this, and each thing needs to be standardized. It needs to be a standardized process because we're comparing the results across countries. In the middle there's David. He's in one of the work streams, and he came along to look at what we were doing. And it was quite interesting because culturally, some of the enumerators hadn't measured men before, and so we had to ask if they were okay with this. And then David said he would volunteer, and initially they were a little bit shy, but after a while they all had a good time measuring David's height, and you can see he was probably double the height of most of the data collectors. And this is what we also do is we do training, and then we actually do it's kind of a standardization test to check that the data collectors are actually measuring correctly, so that we can be quite confident in the data. And one of the things we do is that we ask for 20 women and their children to come along to this session, and then I measure everyone, and then each data collector measures everyone, and we see what the difference is between our measurements and see whether there's something that we need to work on a little bit more. Unfortunately, due to COVID, this training has been online and via Zoom. So this is me at home with my little fake baby, and this is for the Senegal team. I was teaching them how to do infant length. This is the Senegal team. We're doing adult height there. This is the India team. We were showing how to do taking hair samples. And this is a picture of the India team online. So you can see it's really, really different, and it has made things a bit more difficult, but we have had to adapt, and they've all been really amazing, all the research teams. So that's the end of my show. So if there are any questions, they'll probably come at the end. Gun?
Yeah, towards the end, that would be perfect. Thank you so much, Hilary. That was really great. And also very interesting to see how you've done many different things, and at one point you realized it all comes together, and this is the position where I can use all of the things that I've learned in the past and worked with. Last but not least, we have Lorna Benton, who is my newest colleague. She is an interdisciplinary research fellow at the London International Development Centre. She focuses on something I think we'll hear a lot more about in the years to come, namely antimicrobial resistance. Coincidentally, Lorna has a lot in common with Hilary. She also did her PhD at UCL, and she has some links to South Africa. So over to you, Lorna.
Sorry, I shared my screen at the wrong time and couldn't unmute that. There we go. Right, can you see that okay?
Yes, you might want to use the slideshow function. You can see all of your slides.
I keep struggling with this Zoom thing at the same time. Right. Okay. Hopefully that's happening now.
Great.
Sorry for the slow start, everyone. I'll start my timer because I know we're going to want some time for questions. And I think that will be the really exciting part. So I will try and keep this brief, but what a pleasure it is to go last, because I benefit from hearing from my colleagues and their amazing experience and great advice. And I'll try and bounce off a few things that's been said already. What I haven't done is put a slide for my kind of backstory. And I think I'm reflecting on that as I'm listening to everyone. Where did I come from? And I'm actually a biologist, I would say. I'd probably define myself as that because it's been the running theme throughout my career, and I never imagined that would be true. But I started off life very interested in health and wondered if I should go into medicine, and that's a whole other presentation as to how I didn't. But I ended up studying human biology and then rounding that off with biology in full, and my degree was in biological sciences, and I went to the University of Oxford to study biological sciences, where I had a bit of a kind of feel around what really made me passionate. And I realized I was so interested in HIV, so passionate about HIV, and I wanted to be involved in any way I could. So I started doing more kind of lab work, and I was interested, so fascinated with how a virus could have such an effect on the immune system. And it was very micro when I was thinking about it in my own little world in my lab, working on projects, and really had no clue about the rest of the world. So after my degree, I knew I needed to change that, and I wanted to work overseas and understand the broader context behind this particular virus at that point. And I think that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because in doing so, I spent some time in the Gambia, and I was working in labs in the Gambia and got to meet people of various disciplines, and got to work on different potential vaccines and so on. But I realized that wasn't the thing that drove my passion. It also wasn't the thing I was particularly good at. So I knew I wanted to work in population health. I just didn't know this kind of thing existed, I think, when I was choosing my degree. And that required a whole different set of expertise. So after some applying, I started my PhD at the Institute of Global Health at University College London. This PhD was actually, it was an MRC doctoral training account. This was a particularly interesting way to do a PhD, and I did enjoy it. It's probably almost too much flexibility for someone like me to choose from. The first year, you can do 3 different projects, and then you choose one of those projects to become your PhD for the remaining years. What I ended up doing was, of course, doing 3 different projects and then choosing an entirely different PhD. And I think that's something that I'm very happy I did. But I had some great advice in that first year, and I'm happy to reflect that in some of the Q&A sessions later. But one of the things I will always remember people saying were, make sure you choose your supervisor, not your subject. And I thought, that's silly, because I know what I want to do. But there are many reasons why people will give you that advice. And I think we can go into that later if you're interested in that. But it's solid advice. You probably won't take it, but please do listen to that advice and at least reflect on why it's being said. Whilst I did my PhD, I was surrounded by amazing, brilliant minds at the Institute of Global Health. And I think that was really the making of me. So my topic was fascinating, and I can tell you a bit about that. But what I really benefited and didn't account for was from the expertise of those just sitting around me, having professors in various topics with a just door between us. I could knock on their door and say, what do you think about this? And probably couldn't do that every minute of the day, but it is such a privilege of research in the academic life. And I think that's one of the biggest pluses. I want to put that out there, because there are some minuses also of the academic life, and I hope to be as transparent about all of those as possible. But at the Institute of Global Health, we really got to grips with understanding participatory research, and I think that is very important. I ended up doing a PhD focusing a lot on HIV and fertility in South Africa, and as an amazing part of my experience was that I got to live in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa for 2 years. And that opened my eyes to the context, the life choices, the anthropology, the behavioral sciences, the epidemiology, demographics, all the other skill sets that really go into making global health what it is. And I think I realized there and then I don't want to pursue a career in one siloed area of work. And I think the future really is about systems thinking and collaboration. And I don't regret for a second what I did, but I think the future looks different. And I would keep that in your mind when you're thinking about what area of work you want to go into. The other rotational projects I did kind of really built up my skill set, and my advice to you would be take every opportunity you can. I ended up working in labs in Kenya at the Wellcome Centre, and then I ended up doing a qualitative project evaluation in Malawi, and that was way outside my scope of skills at the time. I was thankfully mentored and shown how to do this kind of end-line survey questionnaire, and really tried to build up my skills in as many different areas as possible. So moving on, when I then pursued my postdoc at UCL, I felt a bit better equipped to handle some different areas of research using different skill sets. And I actually segued, shall we say, more into the world of nutrition and participatory research. And in this time, I managed to work on 2 different projects, and they were both very important to me. And the first one was called NEON. And NEON was looking at how we might adapt the participatory learning and action cycle that has been proven to work very effectively with women's groups in low-income settings. Can we adapt that, or the language at the time was reverse, innovate that to, shall we say, low-income settings in London? And that was such a creative piece of work, because I got to work with people that very much cared about the public engagement side of things, the participatory approaches. I worked with community facilitators who ended up being really the lead researchers for their own community, which was the British Bangladeshi community of Tower Hamlets. Some really amazing people there and lifelong friends. And in that time, 5 to 10 minutes really isn't very long at all, is it? In that time, we looked at adapting this intervention and getting a bit creative. But part of my day-to-day was also very much based on the stage of the project life cycle. So that's the only element I would add to what does your average day look like. I think it really depends where you are in the project as well. And that cycle can look like applying for funding and writing grants, to receiving the grants and setting up the project. And in my experience, that can take months, onboarding everyone who's ready. And there can be budgeting, finances, partnership management, everything that you don't think of as research at the time. Then the actual research can be preparing documents, tools, protocols, submitting to ethics. And then you get to the field, and that's for me one of the most exciting parts. And you can be conducting interviews or questionnaires, training members of your team to work on the same tools, following that analysis and write-up. The similar project lifecycle can be replicated in the second project, and I won't go too much into it. The second project we called HEEE, and it was a fab collaboration with health, education, engineering, and bringing all of those together to meet the environment. I would say that was an amazing experience for partnering with NGOs like Save the Children and other universities in India like JNU and IIT Delhi, and set me up for what came next, which was one of the biggest projects I've ever worked on. It was quite a shift from going to academic life into private sector. And I really wanted to know what that felt like and how you hear that private sector is very efficient. So I wanted to check out those rumors. But mostly I was drawn to working on something so important and also the future. I think working on antimicrobial resistance, which was a true collaboration between microbiologists, veterinarians. We had economic experts, policymakers. Everyone really came together for this project, and this was a pot of money. It's UK aid money, so it's provided by the British government to what we call the management agent, which was in this case Mott MacDonald, and that is an engineering firm with a strong international development arm. And we together worked in 24 countries, or up to 24 countries, to develop surveillance systems and build capacity to tackle the burden of AMR. Now, move on quite quickly. I also want to highlight that I feel the different techniques and skills I've acquired, I have had to build that up in a number of different ways. And I think diversity can be the spice of life. Sometimes it's out of necessity. So I've also worked at Public Health England and worked on a stigma survey there. I've contracted for the World Bank. I've done some kind of freelance work for the World Bank. And I've done the same for Gates Foundation, also at Mott MacDonald before I went there permanently. And also I would add, I'm still studying. So I've gone back to City University to learn more about food policy, because I think that is a very interesting, important area of work for the future also. And I just want to flag that because I think the academic life is very much one of continuous learning. It's not always provided to you. Sometimes you have to go out and get it. And I think I will stop there because this rounds off in my final role that has brought me to where I am today. And I think somebody said earlier, it's kind of only now at this point you reflect and think, this is where it was all leading to, and now I understand. But I think I have a truly holistic set of interests, and that is thinking about health in terms of human health, but also animal health and environmental health. And that is reflected in what we call the One Health approach in my previous role. And at LIDC, it's reflected in this huge range of areas that we are now working in and towards. And I think this kind of broad sense of interest and understanding the context and the systems of systems will be the future. So I'm going to stop there, sweating, trying to race through this all and say thank you very much.
Thank you, Lona. That was really fascinating. Really happy to hear about your journey and also your experience in the private sector, which I think is not all academics have. So I think that's quite interesting to hear about. We now have about 15 minutes for Q&A, and you can ask your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand, I think. While you prepare your questions, I'll ask a few questions that we already got from the sign-up forms. So we'll start with a question from Manusha at the University of Sussex. They wonder about how you can find research opportunities in the development sector sector as an international professional. Does any of you have any specific knowledge about that? I'd like to answer that question. Gregory, maybe not. I guess it's about finding funding opportunities for PhDs, which I guess can be quite limited.
I will start, and apologies if it doesn't really reflect the question, because I think I applied for my PhD funding quite a while ago now. But what I will say now, I appreciate much more than I did before the value of things like LinkedIn and Facebook. They're not the obvious places to look, but if you follow, I think, the right people or the institutions that you're interested in, you can find a number of opportunities. For example, nutrition at LSHTM, I follow on Facebook, and I see a surprising number of opportunities posted there. LinkedIn can be really useful. There are also a number of things I've written down, DevX, charity job. These are actually more about jobs, I think, rather than PhD funding, but they're often mixed in. I would look at the universities in particular that you're interested in. I think I was very focused on where I wanted to be because I knew what I wanted to do, and I just went specifically to their websites and I looked, and it's time consuming, but I think that is still the most useful way to do it when you know where you might want to be. And I'll stop there and hand over to anyone else.
Can I just say for my funding, so the one thing I'd say, it is very competitive, and I was quite surprised at how competitive it is. But it's also, as Lorna was saying about LinkedIn, but it's also your contacts. So I achieved the funding, it was through the NHRI, and actually a friend saw the advert. It was an internal advert and sent it to me. So I don't know if I would have seen it otherwise. So it's also just keeping contacts and letting people know that you are looking for funding to apply for a PhD.
Okay, great.
Just a couple more. Yeah, sorry. They're just general kind of databases, and I'm not too sure if they're just for UK residents, but there's jobs.ac.uk, which is, that's perhaps the main portal for PhD opportunities and often postdoc. There's also more in kind of like the environment side. There's a website called Earthwork jobs, and often that's quite good for American-based universities as well, so PhDs and postdocs.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. That's a very good advice. Rose, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, not really, because I haven't been successful myself so far in finding my PhD. But I think the networking that Hilary was mentioning is important, because that's how I managed to find my supervisor. So Claire. So I think it's through networking, with my role and networking with academia, people in academia. That's how I've sort of managed to find at least my supervisor. So I think it can work the other way around as well. If you're in academia and trying to find opportunities in international development, I think making contacts and networking with people already in those sectors. And because, like Lorna mentioned, some of the opportunities will be probably in international development spaces, and so someone within that space then will become aware of it and can let you know of it. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much for that.
Sorry, just one other thing that I learned a bit too late, but often when you're doing your MSc, so if you're doing your MSc, often those supervisors are looking for potential PhD students. So it might be if you can do, but it's a bit of a longer way, but that might be a way forward as well.
Okay, excellent. All good advice. We have a question from Mona. Mona, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question directly?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. It was really interesting hearing about everyone's sort of different paths where they are. So I'm currently a distance master's student at SOAS, and what that means is that outside of the sort of direct tutors and my dissertation supervisor, I don't get a huge amount of kind of face-to-face time or interaction or exposure to what's going on in the faculty. So I was wondering if anyone had any kind of suggestions for other routes to get some more exposure to research or some volunteer research experience, kind of outside of my course and the few people who I can bother about it.
Okay, thank you for that question. Would anyone like to volunteer to answer?
I'm happy to start, mostly because I hate silences. And happy for any of my colleagues to jump in as well. But apologies, I'm just thinking as I'm speaking, and feel free to email me if you want a more comprehensive idea. Going back to the networking thing, that is incredibly important in academia. It's true. Like I think I gave you the websites, but really I think my career has been built on knowing someone to take me to the next place. You can still do that using social media or whatever. If you don't know the person, and I think on LinkedIn now I've added professors that have taught me, and I had no idea that whilst they would be teaching me in one seminar, they're also posting on LinkedIn all these opportunities. So I'm not sponsored by LinkedIn, but I will say there are ways to network outside of face-to-face interactions, and the power of a message and saying I'm really keen to do an internship with you is invaluable. I think a lot of people are looking for that. I know LIDC look for internships, for example. Sorry to steal that plug. So I think the only thing I could say to you is write to people, track people, stalk people. I did this for my PhD and said, will you supervise me? You've never met me before, but I'm really nice, I promise. And it kind of worked. And I think that is so important.
And also
Cool.
just
going
on from what Lorna was saying, because our students have all been basically distance learning for this whole year because we haven't been able to teach them face to face. And so one of the things I've noticed they've asked for people coming to give talks on careers and coming to give talks on the work that they're doing. And then there's a Q&A session and they've got the contact details of that person. So as Lorna says, it's then following up that contact and emailing and just persevering. And I know you feel like a pest sometimes, but sometimes that's the way to do it. They're going to remember you. So yeah, just persevere.
Cool. Thank you.
Great.
Sorry, I thought of another one. I knew this would happen. I know there are, I don't know if this is your interest, but organizations like World Bank, WHO, FAO, I think there are junior professional programs that might be of interest. I didn't go down that route, so I'm not the most knowledgeable, but that is very practical experience, and it's also age limited, so it's something to think about now. Making a huge assumption about the age of the audience, but I've timed out, and I didn't know that until I timed out. So I think it's just something to keep in mind as well for practical experience.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to that, I think if you have an idea of some of the organizations that you would like, what you'll be interested in, the type of work they do, I think, like Lorna was saying, follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on Facebook, make contact with different people. We've had students in my organization who make contact for different things, and sometimes we have people coming in even for shorter times, even when there isn't a formal internship program. We've had students who have said, they will be available for a week or two to help analyze data, and they work with monitoring and evaluation teams within the organization. They are guided by someone, and that just helps them. I think it's just a nice way to start to get exposure and explore your interests, what you think are your interests, sort of validate the things you think you're interested in. So I think making contact, I think in my type of organization, could be any NGO, any international development organization. I think monitoring and evaluation teams tend to be a good place to start because those manage research and that type of work, and then they could lead you then to other people to work in the organization. Yeah. But also just to say, I think collaborating as well we've had graduates collaborate with consultants, so more established consultants. And I found that quite, I think it's quite works well, because you have the established consultant, but then as a junior researcher, they will then give you that platform. And when people could travel, if it was a project to evaluate somewhere or a research to do, they get sent to do the data collection, for instance, which then gives you exposure to projects in the front line. So I think also looking at people that are already established and offering yourself as a research assistant with an established consultant, I think is a good way. We've had some of those come back later, you know, with further interest and able to do some piece of work on their own as well. Yeah.
Excellent. I think that's great advice. So there's some messages in the chat. So thank you to Abdul Rashid, who's shared a link to SOAS Connect, I think it's called, which is a group where you can find a mentor if you're a SOAS student, I assume. And Greg has also shared the links that he mentioned earlier for funding opportunities, if I'm not mistaken. We have another question that we received before this event. It's from Portia at the University of Pretoria. And she wonders what her career paths in research could be after completing a master's in public health. Does anyone want to answer that question? Public health, maybe someone at, I guess you're all LSHTM.
Yeah, I think well, you've opened a lot of doors by doing a master's in public health, and I think it's maybe one of the things on Greg's slides was the transferable skills. So it's either, you know, looking at what part of public health you're interested in, and then going forward with that. So we're, you know, if it's something, I don't know if you staying in South Africa, but looking at, for example, the Department of Health, if it's something with policy that you're looking at, so or if you're looking at an academic institute. So I think it's trying to choose what part of public health you are interested in, and maybe a few, and then looking at options within that. But that's a wonderful degree to have, so well done.
Would anyone else like to add to that?
Yeah, I can follow. Sorry, I'm just trying to type a message in the chat box at the same time. So yes, you could do so much. Really, you can change the world, and you should. So there are lots of places you could do that, and lots of different areas. The university route is just one of them. And I think other than that, there are very cool organizations now. I was just thinking of Nesta. I don't know if you're aware of Nesta, that's a specific organization, but it's an idea really of a place where you can have change. You go to a think tank if you're interested in trying to sway policy. And I think it speaks also to the interdisciplinary skills that you might need. For example, I came out with more epidemiology, demography, qualitative skills. I could do an analysis, but I wouldn't know what a political economy analysis was when I came out of my PhD. And for think tank, you know, there might be a bit of a step or some more training you need to do to get, if it's different from your skill set. That's what I'm trying to say. You might want to follow the academic life, but change setting or discipline. And that, I think, comes with pros and cons. I've been very interested in moving into more of a nutrition space in a more holistic sense, and that just takes time. And I think just be aware of that. And there are different ways to do that. What else could you do? So there was also the Faculty of Public Health. I was thinking, if you're based in the UK, this is a kind of more professional public health training scheme that will have you working within the NHS. It's different to research, and be very aware of that. But if you're looking for something more applied, that could be of interest. Again, you have the kind of global level of the kind of tripartite, you call them. And these are the big UN agencies that might also be of interest. And I think that's everything I can remember at the moment.
Okay. Thank you both.
Maybe just a point on if you're thinking it's on international development, I think looking at more of systems approach and systems thinking, I think, which I think Lorna mentioned as well, is probably a good way, because the way most of the work will be supporting national systems or district systems. So it's I think it does offer more opportunity for what you can do if you're thinking around systems and system strengthening, be it community or whatever level of systems, rather than a single intervention, which will probably limit you to more academic research, I think. Yeah, so program evaluations, that type of thing as well, I think offers you more opportunity in international development.
Great. So we're about to run out of time, but we have one final question from Alessia, and it's probably a bit more of a personal question. It is about how you manage stress. I can imagine it's quite stressful to do a PhD, and Rose, you will be multitasking with a job and a PhD. So we can do a round, just your top tip for managing stress in academia. Greg, do you want to start?
Good. Could I go first? Because I've actually got a meeting now that I'm late for. Yeah.
Please.
So sorry, Greg, if that's okay. Yeah, that's one stressful thing, is you've got so many things to manage. One, my top tips for stress: coffee, chocolate, and yoga. those are the things. But also to break things down into really, really small steps, because it's a massive, long journey, and to try and not always think of the end thing, actually just to break it down and try and manage that. And at the moment, we've got our master students who are at a very high level of stress because they're handing in their dissertations in 2 weeks. And also to try and speak to your supervisor and get support from those around you. So, but thank you everyone, and lovely to meet you all, and I'm sorry that I have to go.
Thank you, Hilary.
Thanks,
sorry for keeping you so long.
No. Okay, bye. I'll see you soon. Bye.
See you soon. All right. And Greg, would you like to?
Yeah. So it's something which I think more and more about the older I get, like mental health side and so on. I guess when I did my PhD, I can't remember how old I was, early 20s, you kind of just plow on through it and get through it. But I would just say, for me now, communication, being honest and open with your supervisor as much as you possibly can, particularly if you have that relationship with your supervisory team, that is for me absolutely key. If you do need to take a holiday or whatever it may be, they know how much work you've done, how good your work was, etc., etc. So be as open and honest in your communication, to the people who ultimately are, your bosses, is really important. And just to share just what I would consider to be a really good pearl of wisdom when I was doing my PhD. In the first year, I used to be in, the offices in the weekends, and a guy in his third year said to me, "Greg, what are you doing in here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just doing some reading." And he said, "Greg, you need to work harder during the week and plan your weekends better." And I was like, wow, he got me on both sides. I wasn't working hard enough in the week, and I wasn't doing anything on the weekend. And I don't know, just having that balance, whether it's Saturday, Sunday off, whatever it may be, and you have that to do whatever you enjoy. So yeah.
Reclaiming the weekend, basically.
Yeah.
Great advice. Rose, do you want to go next?
I was listening keenly from Gregory and Hilary, because I'll be needing that. But I'm hoping to just be able to carve out some time to do. I do running, so I'm hoping I can still be able to do that at some point. It's one thing I must say I'm quite nervous that I'm thinking, because I do a lot of running. I know I will do far less, but I really want to be able to still be able to get out at some point when everything is just so busy, and clear my mind. So yeah, that's really, and I think Greg, your point on weekends, I'm thinking about it, how I don't end up using all my time, my weekend time, which is something I did for my master's, for my MSc. I did a lot of weekend work, which I was doing part-time as well, so it probably didn't help, but yeah.
Okay. Lorna, any final advice from you?
Oh, I have so many things I could say, but the fact you're asking the question is super important already. I think that's a very essential thing to prioritize is mental health and stress. And one thing I'll say about the academic life is it's appealing because of the variety and the interdisciplinary and the movement and the travel. These are all things that can also make you feel quite unstable at times. It's quite hard maybe to decide where you want to live. You're often reacting to the opportunities in front of you. So I think just start with your self-awareness. It's going to sound very yogi, but one of the things I think I might do on an annual basis is run away and become a yoga instructor, because I think we're all still learning to manage our stress no matter where we are in this pyramid. And I think, what can I say to that, except something that's helped me, I think, is realizing that it's a long journey. And with your PhD, I wanted to spend every waking minute trying to write my dissertation, and then it just kept going on and on. So it wasn't sustainable. And if you want to make a career out of this, it's not a race. You do have to switch off and go look after yourself, even when you are the only person telling yourself you have to do that, because that is probably what will happen in academia. Think very carefully if this is the course for you. Before you do a PhD, check, do I need to do one? Do I want to do this? And if you do, give yourself permission to take those breaks. And that's personal to you. It could be fitness, it could be seeing your friends, it could be anything in a non-pandemic world, but just prioritize it. That's the only thing I can say.
All right, great. Excellent advice from all of you. So I think we will end there, but thank you so much to all of our speakers. It's been really, really great. And I think it's been useful for everyone who's here, even those of us not doing PhDs. I've learned some good tricks on stress management. I will go have coffee and chocolate. Yeah, we will post this recording soon on our website if you want to revisit it. And yeah, thank you to everyone. And have a nice weekend when that time comes.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.